Hey guys, the movie that we're going to recap today is about the future, in which a virus, which has killed off many of its children, has hit the USA and adults are now fearful of teens. That's when a group of teenagers develops superpowers and is imprisoned in a detention camp, but the group must seek a safe haven for themselves and others like them. The Darkest Minds is a 2018 American dystopian superhero film directed by Jennifer Yuh Nelson and written by Chad Hodge. To find out the whole story, make sure to watch the video until the end. Let's start. The movie begins in the year 2043, where in the United States, kids and teenagers begin to die because of a terrible disease that can only affect children while adults remain unharmed. This disease is contagious and spreads very fast. As a result of the disease, 98% of kids and teenagers die, leaving behind the 2% that survive, becoming abnormal. The disease triggers a special ability in these children, which makes them dangerous. That's when the government urges all parents to hand over their surviving child to a camp for healing and research. The President of the United States at that time, President Gray, claims that his son Clancy has survived the disease and is currently being treated at a camp for healing and his condition is getting better. In the camp, the doctors and scientists classify children and their disorders into 5 categories by giving each a different color. Green for the kids whose intelligence is increased, blue for the ones with telekinetic abilities, gold for those who have the power to manipulate electricity. Now, the first 3 groups are considered relatively safe and are only being treated in healing camps, whereas the 4th group is considered dangerous. They are allotted with the color red since they can control fire, while the 5th group, colored orange, is the most dangerous group of all, as they can manipulate the minds of other people. The red and orange groups are very rare, and the government considers them a very dangerous threat. They are to be killed immediately on sight. The film then takes us to a setting where a little girl named Ruby is celebrating her birthday. They are worried as all the children around are dead and only Ruby is still alive. At night, Ruby comes to her mother's room and as she holds her hand, she has a strange vision. Later in the story, her mother does not recognize Ruby as her child anymore and calls the government to take Ruby away to the healing camp. Ruby is taken to this camp along with other children. Every child brought to the camp is examined by the doctor to determine what abnormality they have. Ruby is identified as being orange, the most dangerous group. Therefore, the doctor wants to kill her immediately with a lethal injection. That's when Ruby convinces them that she's green, the one whose intelligence is improved, and she is not dangerous. At the camp, Ruby now lives her life as a green. 6 years have passed when Ruby, who's working in the camp, is scolded by the camp captain for making a mistake. The captain feels that Ruby is not as intelligent as the others and becomes suspicious of her. However, her campmate defends her and insults the camp captain, which infuriates him, and as a result he takes her away for punishment, not Ruby. All children are treated very badly at these camps. Frequency tests are often held that use a very loud sound whose frequency can only be heard by the children. During this test, Ruby faints and is taken to the doctor called Dr. Kate for further examination. The examination reveals that Ruby is really an orange. Dr. Kate secretly writes a note to Ruby saying that they have found out Ruby is an orange and will kill her immediately. The note also tells Ruby to meet Dr. Kate in the boiler room. In a panic, Ruby goes to the boiler room and in there, Dr. Kate is waiting for her. By that time, an alarm has been sounded for an intrusion and all officers are ordered to look for Ruby. With Dr. Kate's help, Ruby manages to escape using Dr. Kate's car, but at the checkpoint she is almost caught, but Ruby uses her powers to control the officer's mind and she flees. In the car, Kate gives Ruby a panic button that can be activated as a tracker if she's in danger. Kate then explains that she's part of the Children's League, whose mission is to save the children from the camps and fight the government. Kate takes her to a gas station to meet her boyfriend Rob, who is also part of the child rescue mission. In an accident, Ruby almost falls and holds Rob's hand when she gets a vision of Rob, who seems to like abusing children. Ruby becomes suspicious of their motives. While she's changing her clothes at a shop, she sees a small girl who can manipulate electricity. The girl runs away when she sees Ruby, but she chases after her. The girl then gets into a van, and Ruby follows her to hide from Dr. Kate. The little girl is named Zhu. She is a mute and is always wearing gloves due to her ability. Zhu is accompanied by 2 friends, Liam and Charles. Liam is a blue with telekinetic powers, while Charles is a green. They agree to go with Ruby and help her escape from Kate. On their way, a woman named Lady Jane chases them. Lady Jane is a child hunter who works for money. Looking for Ruby, Kate also tries to pursue them. That's where Liam uses his telekinesis to harass them by scattering the leaves, cracking the road, and even knocking down trees. Because of this, they manage to get away. The four kids hang out together and get to know each other. However, Ruby does not reveal her true identity as an orange and lies that she's a green. Liam explains that they are on their way to the East River to a group of children led by a mysterious person named the Slip Kid. They don't know the identity of the Slip Kid, but it looks like he's an orange who can control people's minds. Liam also explains that the Children's League, led by Dr. Kate, is not a good place to stay. A while back, he was in the Children's League, where they trained them to use their abilities to fight against the government. Liam didn't like the idea of becoming a soldier, so he ran. Meanwhile, Ruby and the others spend the night at an inn. Ruby then reminisces about the past and thinks about the time she spent with her parents. It is revealed that she couldn't really control her ability, and because of that, she accidentally erased her parents' memories of when she was a kid. While sleeping, Ruby accidentally touches Yu's hand and gets a vision that she used to be in a government camp. But eventually she and hundreds of others rebelled and fled. The rebellion was led by Liam, and because of the trauma that Yu had to witness during life in the camp, she became mute. In the morning, they drive to a long-abandoned mall to pick up supplies. They really enjoyed doing this because they had never had a normal childhood. That's when all of a sudden, their bodies are lifted and controlled by a group of people. Luckily, Yu uses her electric power to stop it. Turns out, they're also a group of children that have telekinetic abilities. At night, they talk about the Children's Association in the East River and its very secret nature. They know where the East River is, but they don't know the exact location because it's a secret and they can't tell. However, Ruby uses her telepathy to make one of them unconsciously give a clue about the location. The clue are the letters EDO. Later that night, the genius Charles tries to figure out what EDO is, but he finds nothing. However, after talking to Ruby about her father being a cop, Charles starts to realize that EDO might be a radio frequency. He concluded that E represents 5, D represents 4, and O represents 0. He then uses the number 540 for the radio frequency. They finally receive a message from the frequency and find that the location is at Lake Prince, Virginia. The next day, Lady Jane ambushes them again and she uses the sound frequency of her rifle to incapacitate the children. Luckily, Ruby uses her powers to control Lady Jane's mind and gives her a just punishment. Liam and the others are shocked to find out that all this time, Ruby's been an orange. That's when Ruby explains to them the reason why she lied to them and that she isn't proud of her abilities. Sometime later, Ruby confides in Liam and talks about her past. They start to fall in love with each other. Finally, they continue their journey and arrive at Lake Prince, Virginia. There they meet other children just like themselves. They are so amazed and excited because they haven't seen that many children in a very long time. They then meet the Slip Kid, and it turns out all this time he is the son of the president, Clancy Gray. Clancy is an orange just like Ruby. Later that night, they have a big party. Liam and Ruby dance together romantically. In the morning, they are all given an assignment, and Ruby is assigned to help Clancy. Clancy tells Ruby that he is one of the first to survive the terrible disease, and the government used him to experiment to create a cure, but the doctor failed. His father had to lie to the public that they had found the cure and that he's recovering. Clancy eventually escaped and formed the Children's Association, where all the children can live safely. Clancy then teaches Ruby how to control her powers and control other people's minds without touching their hands, and Ruby eventually succeeds. In return, she teaches them how to erase people's memories. However, during this process, Clancy controls her mind and tries to kiss her. Ruby, distraught, hits him and leaves. Later, Ruby and her friends finally decide to leave the place, but while on the run, they are ambushed by the troops of the camp. Liam tries to fight back, but suddenly becomes unconscious. Turns out, Clancy's made him unconscious. It is then revealed that Clancy has been the mastermind behind it all. He has even contacted the camp captain to arrest all the children. At the same time, He has been manipulating his own father, the president. Clancy is taking control of the government by using his powers. Clancy's main goal is to create an army of children with superpowers so that he would never get caught or abused by anyone. Ruby then uses her powers to make the camp captain commit suicide as Yuh controls the electricity to create a trick to escape. Then, suddenly, armed forces arrive with helicopters to arrest all the children. The troops brought the children in the red group who can control fire. Turns out they have been secretly weaponized by the government, and they set the camp ablaze. The final battle ensues. The Red Army tries to burn Liam and his friends, but Liam uses his powers to retaliate. That's when Clancy arrives in the middle of the battle and manipulates the minds of all the children there. Liam and the others are forced to leave the location and abandon Ruby, because only Ruby has the power to face Clancy. Ruby uses her ability to create her own army. However, Clancy shows his brutal nature and controls their minds so that they kill themselves by shooting each other. Clancy then tries to use his new memory-erasing powers to turn Ruby onto his side and forget her friends. But Ruby uses her powers to control the pilot's mind, making the helicopter crash and explode. Ruby then manages to escape the explosion with the help of Charles, but unfortunately, Charles gets burnt and severely injured, leaving Ruby no choice but to use her panic button to call the Children's League for help. The next morning, the League squad comes to pick them all up. Charles is immediately taken to the hospital for treatment, while Yuh is adopted by a good family. However, Liam is arrested by the League because he has betrayed the League before. The League believes that he knows too much about the League to be left free. Later, Ruby meets Kate and bargains to release Liam by promising to be a soldier in the League and fight against the government alongside them. Kate is sure that Liam will never leave without Ruby, and he won't let Ruby join the League. Finally, Ruby meets with Liam. Liam explains that he wants them to stay together as they discuss plans for their future. Ruby is forced to erase herself from Liam's memory so that Liam can be released and so she can join and fight with the Children's League. All memories of Ruby are gone from Liam's memory. He remembers absolutely nothing about Ruby, and he leaves the camp. Ruby cries as she watches him go. At the end, Ruby joins and trains with the Children's League. However, the struggle of Ruby and her friends is far from over because it turns out that Clancy is still alive, and a fierce battle between the two sides will be inevitable. This is it for today's video. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.